Drem Yolok, everyone, and welcome to something a little different. A few weeks ago, we got like a foot of snow on the ground. Power was out for 3 days, trees down everywhere, looked like a hurricane tore through. Kinda sucked. I spent most of that time reading Dragon Champion by E.E. Knight, cozied up by the fire. Fitting, right? I've been meaning to get to it for quite some time, and I finally got my excuse. I've got my love of reading back now, so I figured why not start putting together review videos and recommend good stories to other Dracophiles. And we're starting off really strong. Dragon Champion follows Auron, a rare, scaleless gray dragon on his journey through life. There are very few stories that feature a dragon, an actual honest-to-God dragon, as the protagonist. They're usually filtered through a rider like in Inheritance or Pern to make the story more relatable, or they're shapeshifters like in Warcraft or Divinity for the same reason. If not, then they're typically side characters that more often than not just act like scaly people. To be fair, it is much tougher to write from such a different perspective. Few writers are brave enough to even try, but Knight does a really good job of it. I absolutely love his take on dragons. He puts quite a few unique spins on the breed. First, they're telepathic, and from the moment they're laid, Mom's using this power to give her little ones a head start on life. She tells them stories and passes down generations worth of experiences, complete with sights, sounds, and sensations as they develop. The second they hatch, they know what they are, they know how to move, and they're capable of speech. Hatchlings stay in the cave with Mom for most of their first year. She spends every waking moment playing with them and teaching them about the world while Dad hunts for the whole family. Dragons are very different than men, but they still have their own culture, folk tales, traditions, creation myths, and naming conventions, and all of that gets passed on to the next generation. Entry into drakehood is marked by their first flame, which they become capable of at about 1 year into life. It's purely biological, which I always appreciate, so they only have so much at a time. Dragonfire burns fiercely enough to melt flesh right off the bone like butter. Once they have their fire and can defend themselves against most threats, they get kicked out and it's on to the next clutch. They're only called true dragons once they get their wings. They hatch wingless, which makes sense. Flight is extremely hard, and wings are basically just giant dragnuts until you're big enough to hunt the kind of prey that can fuel them. A squirrel's worth of energy isn't going to let you fly for very long. It's much better spent on growth to climb up the food chain as fast as possible. It's not until about 14 years into life that they develop these massive boils along their backs, under which their wings slowly develop. When they're ready, they pop the mother of all zits. It's about as messy as you'd expect, clean themselves up, and become rulers of the sky. For males, the pronunciation of their name also changes to mark their passage into adulthood. For instance, Auron becomes Auron. Past this point, hunting becomes absolutely trivial. Prey doesn't even get to play the game. It's completely unfair, and there's no counterplay. Had a dream like that once, actually, like something out of another life. If only. Flight is always a suspension of disbelief type thing with dragons. It's just completely impossible. You look at the biggest pterosaur, right? Quetzalcoatlus or whatever, and yeah, it's huge, but it's literally just a giant pair of wings. Its body is a fucking stick. Knight does what he can to make it seem more real, but even with massive lungs that stretch nearly to their tails and multiple hearts to oxygenate flight muscles, it's never enough if we're being honest with ourselves. It's nice to see him make the effort at least. Besides that, there's actually a purpose to the classic behavior of hoarding shinies, and this is what I really like. Knight's dragons need to supplement their diet with metals, ferrous and precious, which get metabolized and incorporated into their scales. Fail to do so, and they develop brittle, malformed, and may even fall out entirely. As a consequence, they have to strike a balance between searching for ores in subterranean cave networks and hunting on the surface where prey is more plentiful. This biological imperative often drives dragons into conflict with hominid races, since their civilizations produce plentiful amounts of gold and silver, easily taken, at least at first. Regarding said hominids, you've got your standard fantasy trinity of elves, dwarves, and men. They're all exactly what you would expect, pretty much. There's no reinventing the wheel going on here. There's also blighters, their common ancestor, it seems like. Picture a Neanderthal, but less evolved and more hairy. Primitive things and savage. More interesting are the other animals in the world, who all have their own languages and cultures to them. Particularly so are carrion birds. They're all prim and proper and classy, and think themselves above the brutish realities of the world by merely eating things that are already dead. They're nice enough to compliment and thank you as you bleed out or slowly starve to death. You know, real gentlemanly. To give you an idea of what kind of universe this is, the first thing male dragons do when they pop out of their eggs is to go after and slaughter all the other males.
Darn, that's awesome! That's really awesome!
It's like fucking Highlander. There can be only one, apparently. The last one standing is dubbed the Champion of the Clutch. Hence, Dragon Champion. Obviously, greys are almost always killed immediately, being scaleless, so Auron coming out on top here is doubly impressive. The females, by contrast, are chill. They just sit back and watch the show. But when all's said and done, the first thing into newborn hatchling bellies is their fallen brothers. Damn, nature, you scary. While tragic and heartbreaking and absolutely metal, it does let you know exactly what kind of story you're in for, and that Knight isn't the kind of author to have everything work out for everybody. From the very beginning, there's a sense of life or death tension hanging over every one of his characters, and while you don't really expect Auron to die, you know that everyone else is fair game. There's no shortage of action throughout the book. It all feels real and very threatening, and you're invested in these characters, damn it, so you're always nervous. It's a real page-turner. After only a few months, shit happens, and Auron is forced to fend for himself long before he should be. Most of the book focuses on world building and survival. Auron has a general goal in mind, but a lot of the time it's all he can do just to stay alive. He nearly dies like 10 times. The poor little guy gets abused regularly.
In the arms of the angel.
As a Grey, he's extremely squishy and vulnerable to just about everything, but there are reasons why that trait is still around. It's not just a defect, not by a long shot. Over time, Auron learns how to make up for his defensive deficit with cunning and intelligence. Without all of those metallic scales rasping against each other, Greys can move whisper quiet and easily avoid detection. They can position themselves to win fights with a sneak attack before they even begin. He only needs to worry about hunting for meat above ground, with no scales to keep healthy. Dragon scale is also very heavy, being partly metal, and he can run, swim, and fly much further and faster than the rest of his kin. And on top of all of that, a Grey's skin is active camouflage, like an octopus, letting him hide in plain sight in a pinch. Is it worth it? Well, if you asked him, I think he'd say yes. He starts his journey absolutely ruthless, and who can blame him after his rude welcome into the world? But after his first few brushes with death, that becomes tempered, and he learns the value of mercy and cooperation, and dare I say it, the art of the deal. He is a curious one, and unlike many of his kin, he understands the value and power of knowledge. He makes friends, parts ways, serves and rules, sees the world, studies history, and becomes wise. It was a joy to watch him grow. There is a major conflict looming in the world, and it's foreshadowed plenty, but it doesn't start to come into focus until the last 100 pages of the book. Until then, the stakes are intensely personal. It's all about Auron finding his way in the world with the few people he cares about. It's nice to have a more grounded fantasy every once in a while. No Dark Lord, or impending genocide, or million IQ nipples. Just life and death. Simple as. I will say, however, that said conflict is introduced, fleshed out, and resolved rather quickly. Like I said, just 100 pages. It doesn't feel too rushed, but Auron basically just YOLOs into a resolution and it just works out. Just dragon things. There's no shortage of emotional investment or payoff. If you're anything like me, you'll be seeing red over what's been happening. But even so, I think it could have used another 50 pages or so of development. Though I will admit that may just be me wanting more story to read. Anyway, Dragon Champion gets a full-throated roar of approval. I thought about stars and ratings and such, but let's be honest, if it's got dragons and doesn't suck, I'm gonna give it full marks no matter what. I am simple man. I see Durg, I simp, so there's really no point. Maybe we can do a tier list or something down the line and rate stories and characters against each other. That would be the only way to do it, I think. I'm definitely hooked, and I'm gonna go through the other 5 books in the series and review those too. I'm deeply enjoying Dragon Avenger so far. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and if you're familiar with the book or decide to pick it up now, let me know what you think of it down below. I enjoy few things more than talking about dragons, so let me have it. Expect spoilers though. And with that, may you be blessed. See ya.